Hello and welcome back. It's so good to see everybody. I am thrilled to have with me the CEO from Seed Talent, Kurt Kaufmann. Kurt and I got to know each other over the last year, and we became kindred souls immediately because we are both highly focused on one area of our business, our industry that we're both passionate about, and that is education. I like to refer often, you've heard me talk about the 3 E's: to engage, to educate, and empower. And this is what we've done in our pharmaceutical practice for years, whether it be a patient, physician, pharmacist, caregivers, doesn't matter. Education is always a key component of that patient journey. Pharma understands this better than anybody. All you have to do is open up a discount copay card and see the material that pharma puts together. It's all about education and the patient journey. And we got into cannabis 5 years ago. We understood that this was going to be, we want to exist at the intersection of anything that was educational. Because we understood that all the stakeholders in a nascent industry are going to be craving education, whether it be physicians, whether it be employees, whether it be caregivers, patients, it doesn't matter. Education is going to be a key component. And so when Kurt and I met each other and I got a chance to look at that Seed Talent and the platform they put together, we immediately decided to shake hands and become partners because we are both seeking the same thing with our business practices. So I want to take a few minutes and chat with Kurt and talk with him about Seed Talent and what they've done and aspirationally what they're trying to do. But Kurt, welcome to join us, and let's hear a little bit about Seed Talent and hear your personal journey into cannabis and how you ended up in the education sector within cannabis.
Yeah, Dan, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on today. So we'll start with a little bit about Seed Talent. That's more important than me, but my journey kind of leads into Seed Talent a bit. So Seed Talent has emerged as one of the largest professional development platforms in cannabis. When we say professional development, we really focus on each of the different areas for somebody to be successful, whether it's at a bud tender role all the way up into the C-suite. And so our initial focus is how do we aggregate and create a centralized place for all of the learning that has to happen for somebody to be successful in this space. And cannabis is really unique in the sense that it's new for everybody. Even folks coming from a legacy market, they're still learning SOPs and best practices and software, as well as plant science and all those different things. And where we saw an opportunity, and this will lead a little bit into kind of my journey into the space, is we saw an opportunity to aggregate all of those different training opportunities into one centralized platform and then create an environment that was really easy to access for the learners and easy on the back end for management and whatnot to really disseminate that information, but also validate that folks are doing that. So we've expanded. We're in about 11 states right now, partnered with some of the largest multi-state operators in the country, all the way down to independent mom and pop shops. And my journey into the cannabis space, so I've been in sales and marketing roles pretty much my entire professional career, but there was just kind of this constant theme that when I was done with my work, it was either time to consume or talk about cannabis, and ideally both. And so when there was an opportunity for me to join the space, back, it was end of 2017, beginning 2018 about, I had an opportunity to join Green Thumb Industries here in Chicago. I was a relatively early employee. I was about 325. Now they're close to 4,000. So got to be in pretty early, joined their organization as part of their Illinois sales team, and then had the opportunity, and I think this experience is pretty familiar with anybody who's been in the plant touching side of the business, is pace of growth is crazy. And if you're willing to wear a lot of hats, you'll have a lot of opportunities to grow. And so was able to kind of work throughout the business on wholesale opportunities, on setting up a few different departments, on trade marketing initiatives. But then the big thing that led into Seed Talent was we were hiring so many folks, maybe 50 to 100 a month, and they were coming in key decision-making roles, had wonderful transferable skills that they were bringing from outside of the space, but they fundamentally had a blind spot as it related to the history, the culture, the context, the science of cannabis. And so I founded Green Thumb's cannabis onboarding program, trained about 700 salaried folks throughout that business. And that's really what eventually led into Seed Talent. And I had the opportunity to partner with Rana Bore, who ran an executive search firm here in Chicago. We saw a similar opportunity with the number of folks getting into the space. Launched Seed Talent originally as an executive search firm that had a staffing component, had an educational component to it. And then the educational piece just grew on a life of its own. And we're now the two separate businesses completely focused on education and professional development.
I love the journey of any cannabis business, especially in our ancillary space, because this is always fascinating to see that, how you find this vein of gold and you go after it. It's very exciting to see a business like when people like you showed up on the scene, we got very excited because it started showing maturity in the industry. When we got in, I also focused on the science. That first thing I did when I got into the industry 5 years ago is I wanted the analog to the pharma industry. So I did a trek to Israel and started meeting the doctors and scientists and that were really doing real clinical peer-reviewed trials in Israel. And that was my moment where I said, geez, that there's so much, I like to call them myths and facts around the plant, that it's as much the things you don't know as the stuff that you are telling patients and customers that's wrong, that really gets scary. And especially when you have bud tenders who have no education giving medical advice.
Sure.
So help me understand your platform and how you engage with employees in a way, anybody really, but as an employer and employee relationship, how does that work? What does that look like? And I'm a bud tender in Chicago, and I'm being onboarded. Walk me through that journey and what I look like before and after as an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So kind of the high level of like what I like to describe our platform is we're a platform that connects knowledge sharers and knowledge seekers in the cannabis space. And so when you put yourself in that bud tender in Chicago standpoint, who are the knowledge sharers that want to share that knowledge with them? So that's going to be brands and service providers selling in the state. That's going to be their own employer trying to communicate, whether it be SOPs or onboarding or standardized customer service experiences, whether that be even ancillary providers, terpene folks, different, just kind of you name it. Again, these folks that are coming in, and one of the big emphasis, that I want to give on the bud tender side is those are often the most passionate and even most educated folks in the space. But to your point, there's so much breadth of knowledge when you're at the tip of the spear being a bud tender. You've got to know history. You've got to understand the culture and the context. You've got to understand great customer service skills. And then as an employer, you want them to be working on upselling and driving efficiency in that whole chain. And so for those folks that are coming into this space at the bud tender level, they're having to learn an entire new industry, learn the science behind it, and still work to honor the KPIs and the different things that their business and their employer is trying to accomplish. And so what Seed Talent does, with that role that we play, and again, in your example for a bud tender here in Illinois, is we supply everything from state required training, so that initial responsible vendor training that they need to be certified in the state. Then when they join their organization, we're partnered with the vast majority of dispensaries across the state to then provide onboarding support. So that's hosting content that was created by their employer. So rather, again, than that, get everybody in a room, let's watch a PowerPoint, they're able to do it self-paced at home or prior to their start date, get all up to speed on how their employer wants them to interact in the SOPs of their business. And then the final step, and this is where we found a lot of success, is not only do you want to know the difference between cannabinoids and terpenes, you want to know the difference between dog walkers and Swift Lifts, that GTI product versus that Verano product. And so we partner with a lot of the different brands and whether it be, again, smokables, inhalables, topicals, tinctures, you name it, we're partnered with the vast majority of the brands here in Illinois and across our focus markets, so that bud tender can create that entirety of their onboarding experience, get that product education, and then throughout the year, as additional products and services come online, be able to then educate those groups at mass. So it really works on behalf of the brands who want to get those ultimate salespeople, the bud tenders, educated on their products. It works for the employer because they want to create that consistent experience. And it also gives the bud tender the opportunity to have confidence in their role because they really have that training to be able to communicate with patients and customers effectively.
Well, one of the areas of your business that I really appreciate, that I really didn't appreciate until we just talked, honestly, is the compliance perspective of it. One of our legacy companies, Concentra Solutions, we monitor customer calls. Here, this call might be monitored for quality assurance purposes. Hopefully it's us.
Yep.
And so we joke that just because a restaurant gets 100 in the health exam doesn't mean the food tastes good. So you might pass with flying colors on the compliance side, but the customer experience is lacking. The compliance side is one of the easier parts to work on because it's pretty black and white. I like to call it it's binary. You either got it right or you got it wrong. You either did something right or did something wrong. But when you get into the more nuanced part, that's where the real opportunity is for education in terms of profit, in terms of return on investment. for help me understand some of the content that you've aggregated to help drive that customer journey, to help drive that customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we were just talking about, and you point out a great point there that I think a lot of times when folks or companies are, think about training, they really focus on just the compliance piece. Is my sexual harassment box checked? Is my state required, training checked? And I think that's a huge missed opportunity from a revenue standpoint, from again, really that customer journey that you're talking about, which is when somebody comes in, the ultimate influencer of the consumer purchase pattern within cannabis is in the last 3 feet. It's walking up to the counter, validating any assumptions that happened online or that they read or that they heard from, great Uncle Tommy, who's been smoking weed for 25 years. And they talk to that hopefully trusted expert that's behind the counter. And that person really drives the ability to upsell that transaction. So, add additional goods. So we've got upsell training, how to ask the right questions to, redirect somebody, particularly in supply constrained markets. That's a real big challenge. Is you sell a client on a product, they come in looking for it. Oh, it's out of stock. How do we train those bud tenders to successfully ask the right questions to still meet the need of that patient or that customer, but transition them successfully to a product that's in stock? That's a big revenue driver, and again, in supply constraints.
I like to say, it's one of my favorite examples, actually, but I like to say in this industry, people, customers, patients are loyal to the plant. They're not loyal to any brands yet. If you go out, if your wife tells you, I need to go out and get some contact lens solution, and she tells me what brand to get, I need the Bausch & Lomb one. If I go to CVS, they don't have it, I'm going across the street to Walgreens. If Walgreens doesn't have it, I might go ahead and give her a call and say, hey, they don't have exactly what you want. Can I get this one? Yeah. But generally speaking, I'm loyal to a brand. That's a mature industry. And in cannabis, patients and caregivers and customers are still loyal to the plant. They're still nice. They don't understand the difference between brands yet. Where's that? That's the component of your training platform I really like, is the sponsored engagement, because that shows the characteristics of a mature industry. That's exactly how pharmaceutical industry works. And that's what you're proposing, what you're putting together, what you put together is exactly what we're trying to do in cannabis. Talk to me about that. Yeah, no,
100%. I appreciate you steering the conversation that way, because that's one of my main, passion points that really kind of got Seed Talent, focused in that area initially. But I'm a big believer that people want to be sold and they want to sell on value. A lot of times, I think when people start to look at, putting together, whether it's their wholesale products and where they're going to price things at, or when they put themselves in the shoes of the consumer, I think a lot of people think, oh, well, people just want the cheapest thing. That's not my lived experience. My lived experience is people want to feel like they're getting a great value, and value is utility divided by price. And so we as an industry need to do a better job, in my opinion, at helping those ultimate salespeople, again, the bud tenders, but even everybody really within that entire supply chain, understand what is the utility derived from their product or their brand that might be different than a utility derived from another brand. And so that's one of the big focuses, is helping folks at a most basic level understand how to do value selling. And again, encouraging their bud tenders, their DMs, all those folks to focus on that value proposition. And then from the brand side, it actually also helps hold those brands accountable, because without brands spending the money, putting in the effort, spending the time, all of those things to train those salespeople, what we see is what happened in Oregon, 5-6 years ago, when everything was being sold on highest THC to lowest price. That's not sustainable for any of us to create the great industry that we're looking for. And it's actually also not consistent, the consumer pattern. Some people are coming in, they're purely price shoppers. Most consumers are value shoppers. And that's where you see things like Kirkland and some of those brands that are out there, where you build that trust with that brand because it's a great product that's going to meet your need at a solid value. And so that brand training element of the Seed Talent platform is really focused on how do we help brands bridge that connection between themselves and those bud tenders, so that they can communicate that value proposition that those marketers are working so hard to create, and make sure that that gets down to the consumer level.
Well, isn't that what it's all about at the end, is really trying to create that. I love your analogy on what is value. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that when you look at the cannabis industry, you have a lot of usually experienced users, mm-hmm. personal users that end up behind the counter, or in our business, behind the phone. Yep. These are people that are passionate about the plant because they personally use it, or they have someone in their family that saved their life. One after the other. When you talk to our employees that work with us, it's constant. People are in this business because they're passionate about it. And the key to brand establishment, I think, is really understanding the brand journey. How do you build that brand journey over a long period of time, and how do you play the long game? And your example of Oregon, I think, is really the best example. The experienced users behind the counter are looking for something very different than the nascent users that are coming in off the street for the first time.
Sure.
And when you look at where the industry is going, where's it going? The largest growing segment is going to be women 40 to 55 years old. And they're all inexperienced users. So we can't take our lens as an industry, the people behind the counter or on the phone, and apply that to the fastest growing segment of our industry. Talk to me about what you think about that in terms of educating the virgin user, because that's really, I think, what this is about in many ways as the industry starts to explode.
Yeah, and I will, I guess, do a little caveat or correction, if you will, that, some of the most experienced users I know are also the women, 40 to 65. That's an emerging class of folks. And I think it's an interesting kind of misnomer or whatnot in the space that, we look at, whether it be gender or age or these different things, as these are kind of the overarching new consumers in the space. And the reality is, I think cannabis has experienced users that really run the gamut of demographics. And where I think, to your point again, is it really is a combination effort where our platform right now is really focused on how do we develop and educate the trade and the industry. And, I think for an outside of cannabis term, Seed Talent is a trade development platform to really help build that kind of foundational knowledge and education. But it really is multi-step, right? As the brands and the industry as a whole have a responsibility to educate consumers, consumers have a responsibility to hold brands in our industry accountable for creating best-in-class products that drive value. We even see the challenges over in California, which it's a very nuanced market, but there's obviously a consumer response that, whether it be taxes, whether it be product selection, whether it be something, it's driving folks into the legacy market. And so there is just a kind of a Herculean effort that's going to need to take place. And we believe that, we're a small part of that. But it's even folks, again, why we're so excited with the partnership with CannabisBPO, because it's no different than whether somebody calls in and speaks to a bud tender or calls in and speaks, with somebody in a service center, is those folks are seeking education. And that's where I think, it's a really interesting opportunity. And you and I have had this discussion previously, that we're at this interesting convergence where cannabis is really focused on the retail experience right now. But when we look outside of cannabis, retail isn't as strong of an presence as it once was. And so kind of our hypothesis here, and I think, we've talked about this a little bit, is that for retail to be successful and sustainable, it needs to be value add retail. It needs to be when you walk in, whether you're, Johnny or Susie, 70 years old and been consuming for 50 years, or whether you're somewhere in between there and this is your first experience, you need to be able to walk in and speak to somebody who's going to actually add value and make you feel comfortable with the products.
Oh, no question. I for years I lectured and judged business plan competitions at University of North Carolina in Western Carolina.
Yeah.
And I was good friends with the people in the professors in the entrepreneurship program. And it shocked me when I drove up to North Carolina through some of these blighted little towns where all the retail stores were gone when the Walmart shows up.
Right.
And then over time, for 15 years, I'm making that drive. All of a sudden, these little shops start to pop up and adapt and create value and create service. They couldn't compete with Walmart. Right. They're selling the local olive oil, or they're selling, different things that consumers are looking for. All of a sudden, these shops started to reopen and develop. And I think the cannabis industry is about to go through the same sea change. What you just described is there's going to be superstores that pop up, or the equivalent of online superstores. Just like QT used to be really big. Now you go to Buc-ee's in South Georgia, and it's 500 gas pumps, and all of a sudden QT doesn't look so big.
Right.
Same thing's going to happen in cannabis.
Yep.
And the small mom and pops are going to be destroyed unless they can bring something different. And so that's what I love about the convergence in our partnership, is that we can help everybody, whether you're a big business, a little business, compete.
Yep.
And bring that added value to the marketplace.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I don't even know, and I don't even know if we're at the point of competition right now. I think there's so much market to be had. There's so much green space in front of us. And that's where, again, I started my career at a multi-state operator. We work with independents. And I think one of the challenges that's going on in the space is right now there's so much kind of like focus on good versus bad, competition versus not, that the reality is like, there's so much green space. We need to focus on building really sound business fundamentals. We need to focus on educating our employees, our customers, our patients throughout the entire supply chain. Because when real competition comes, and I started my career with Altria Group, those folks sell consumer packaged goods to 250,000 stores across North America. That's real competition. And those folks run like a fine oiled machine. And so where I'm really focused, and I think, again, we share this passion, is how do we build these strong business fundamentals into these businesses that are growing like a rocket ship and are sometimes, again, constrained or focused on the next earnings call or whatnot because of access to capital and some of the constraints that happen in the marketplace. But no, I think we share a common passion for making sure that the tracks are laid in the right spots so that when real competition comes into the marketplace, the legacy cannabis operators and legacy, I include multi-state all the way down to Humboldt, Triangle folks, where you're in pre-federal legalization, to make sure that those folks have the right tracks laid for success.
I couldn't agree more. It's a very exciting time to be in the business. I couldn't be more excited about our partnership with Seed Talent. You'll be able to find Seed Talent's information on our website. We'll be doing a formal announcement. But Kurt, tell us where you can find Seed Talent's website. And
yeah, absolutely. Seedtalent.com. I would encourage folks to check that out. If you hit the sign up button in the top right hand corner, we actually offer free cannabis principles and foundations courses to anybody who joins our platform. We really believe in universal access to baseline education. So education that would cost $500 plus from other providers in the space. We supply that for free to anybody who wants to get in and educate. So yeah, definitely check it out, seedtalent.com, or follow us on all of our socials as well.
Wonderful. Couldn't be more excited about kicking off our partnership and applying the 3 E's on the phone, applying the 3 E's at dispensaries, and all the way up to the C-level suite.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yep. Thanks, Dan. Talk soon. Bye-bye.